Did you know that too much character information is bad? Why are we going against the logic and what people everywhere else have been telling you? What is wrong with you people, quest givers? We'll find out in the rest of this video.
If you're looking for adventure, grab the modules each month to support the channel and play the campaign with your gaming group. You're sure to get hooked on adventure.
Help support the making of this channel by going to questgivers.com and purchasing a variety of modules and RPG tools that basically are going to help enhance your game. Now, that is how you can best support us. People are always asking, how can we support you? Buy the modules. That may be too much information, which you can also get on our mailing list through questgivers.com. Too much information is bad. Why is too much information bad? What is our philosophy? Why are we bucking the trend here, Scotty?
Okay, there's some good reason too much information is bad. We feel that it kind of pigeonholes your character in the game. That's the kind of basic thing. So if you make this 30-page backstory, then the game master is trying to fit the game to match your backstory, right? But if you just have a little bit of information that you can role play into the game as the game needs it, not as you need the game to fit your backstory, then the game can become more interesting and evolve. Like, you can actually add to the story as you see fit. So if you have such a huge backstory, and for example, and the game is clunkily trying to fit to that, it doesn't flow well. But if you see opportunities within the story to say, oh, maybe I've thought about my backstory, and then this particular event that's happening right now, I can tie in with my backstory. I'll just add to my backstory and add to the game. So you're all discovering it at the same time. It's not the game master trying to force the story to fit your background. You're adding to the game, and you're surprising the DM and the GM and making the experience just that much more fun for everybody else. For example, my character that I'm playing in the D&D campaign, my character became a paladin, and my backstory was simply this: that he was a lifelong soldier. He survived a battle, a horrendous battle. He was the only survivor. He kind of curled up into himself in like a fetal position because he just felt he was the only person left alive in the world. Like, it was just this weird, oppressive thing. And that's when this goddess came to him, essentially an angel, and kissed him on the cheek and then kind of rose him up. And he had a new purpose in life. She got him out of this dark place that he found himself in. And so he became a paladin, and he had a really hard time with it because he has never been trained he's been trained as a simple soldier his entire life. He's never been trained with the dogma and the doctrine of the church. And so he had a really hard time adjusting to his paladinhood, to his powers. And so that was interesting. And I've been able to, with that simple backstory, I've been able to add and enhance the game through, what's happening in the story. I can add little clues of my background that I make up on the spot, as opposed to, oh, well, I wrote, on page 30, I wrote that this, what happened in my background, so that doesn't fit. Okay, whatever. But, in that case, I'm enhancing the story by adding to it, as opposed to, oh, the story isn't working to my background, darn it, and having to worry about that for the whole game. Then it's like, oh, when is the point where the story is actually going to work to my background? You look for the story to add opportunities to add to your background. It's a whole different approach, and I think it's really going to save a lot of stress on your part and the game master's part.
Our mantra as quest givers, and Scotty and I were like this before we became quest givers, build the character in the game, not before the game. So, I have always said, be succinct. We talk about this in how you are a game master. You should be succinct in your details and your descriptions to allow the players, give the players agency. Well, you as the player need to consider the GM. You are the GM of your character. And so you need to be succinct so that the GM can feed off what you're doing and add and subtract elements as required in the game. So you need to be just as conscious of what you're doing as the GM is when they're feeding you little tidbits for story. You know, imagine if you wrote a TV show where 4 writers rocked up and said, here are the characters. The lead scriptwriter goes, okay, well, how am I going to weave these people into a group? It's a very, very difficult task to do. And experienced DMs will tell you most of the time, people's like, oh, I used to have people write me a long backstory. Now I just get them to give me like no more than 25 words, just, you know, a brief description of what their character, who their character is. You know, something you could, if you met a person in an elevator, that's kind of your experience of them, you know, and you can build from that. You've got a skeleton you can add musculature and things to while you're playing the game. If you're playing the game and the DM has an NPC who's talking about a war, and you're like 6 or 7 sessions in, and your character has always been a little bit of sort of on the depressed side, and it's, you know, more forlorn and whatever, here's a perfect opportunity to say, you know, I know the war you're talking about because that's when the enemy killed my parents. There you've introduced, you know, the significance of what that is to your character. You may not have had that in your backstory before. You may not have ever mentioned the parents of your character, but now you've injected this into the story using what's been happening in the story as a catalyst for revealing more about your character. So what you're doing in the game is building the history of your character while you're playing, rather than writing the history before you get to the game. Because it's way more interesting and exciting to, as the player, learn more about your character while you're playing, because then you want to explore and discover more about what's going on. We advocate really being fast and loose with NPCs, with player characters, the key concepts of the motivation and the immediate needs. Playing with those as a player, which gives you, like, there's just so much more that's going to add to the game, that the other players are then going to be like fixated on. Wow, what's going to happen next? My character also has this interesting thing, and they're then adding stuff, and the story is just ballooning from, you know, this small little catalyst. The GM is dropping little things, and the players are dropping little things. It's this perfect sort of, like, you know, this is why people stick around and want to continue playing, because they want the discovery. They want to discover what's happening.
I feel like our NPCs are that way too. You know, like we kind of take that philosophy with our NPCs. This is about player characters, but we take that philosophy with NPCs, where, you know, you're learning about the NPCs in little bits and pieces. I want to talk a little bit about a character that I played in a one shot. Okay, so this is just, you know, this is gonna be once. There's not much gonna be a background to the character after the game, right? It's just the game is what matters. Okay, and I had this. We were playing in a cemetery, so I assumed that it was going to be undead, right? I assumed that there would be undead, so I thought it'd be fun to make a bard who was kind of pretended to be a necromancer. He was like a charlatan, right? And
this was with Jim, wasn't it?
Yes, with Jim
Tabletop
at Mace this last year.
Channel.
Now it's November, and he ran a fantastic game, super fun for the crafters, and we had guests and everything. But so I made this character who was kind of this charlatan bard who pretended to be a necromancer, and I thought, oh, it'd be fun with the undead. But his little dirty little secret was he was afraid. He was actually afraid of undead, right? But the game took this really weird turn, and it didn't have anything to do with undead. It actually had to do with aliens, and we ended up on an alien spaceship, right? And so my character was kind of a jerk the whole game. He was kind of a dick and a jerk, and we got to the spaceship, and I decided that I was going to change his background on the spot, because really no one had discovered it yet, because we hadn't run into any undead. So I basically had changed it to that he was abducted by aliens. He was abducted, and the players were like, oh my god, that's awesome, and it just really enhanced the game. And after the game, one of the players was like, oh, did you talk to the DM and like work this all out and everything? And I was like, no, I just made this up on the spot. And the DM picked it up. That's another thing. The DM just picked it up and went with it. Now, as a game master, I like to do that. When people throw out character bits, grab those and use them in your game, right? A lot of game masters, they're so focused on the story that they're not thinking about, oh, how can I add those little bits that the players are throwing at me into the game, incorporate it into the game. It's so easy to do. And so, it's easy to get caught up in the story, and it's like, the story must be this. They'll just ignore it or whatever. And I'm the kind of player where I'm not like a dog with a bone. I'll throw a bit to the DM. If the DM or GM doesn't take it and go with it, I'll lay off. That's it. I gave them their bit. If they don't want to incorporate it, that's fine. But as a game master, I almost certainly always do.
We've talked about strict turn order in previous videos, and I'm a firm adherent to strict turn order, as we've discussed before. But one of the reasons for that is because I don't want to eat into the player's time. If I'm sitting here talking for 20 minutes, the players are losing time to play. Think about how your player agency in the game affects the other players. If you're standing there and you want to reveal this big reveal of your background, and you're going to take 20 minutes to do so in some, sort of stand up and talk soliloquy style to the audience, you're taking time away from the other players. It may be very interesting, but consider that. If look at the players and see what are they getting out of it. Are they having fun, or are they looking bored? This is very important, because you may be pissing off the other players. They may have this kind of smile on their face, like, just stop talking now. Some of the audience might be doing that now with me. I can't see them, so it's great. I'm going to keep yakking on. But you have to consider the other players and how your agency affects their agency. If you're throwing in all kinds of wonderful backstories, I'm the king of the land, and everyone knows who I am. It's like the other players are, well, how come I'm not the king of the land and everyone knows who I am? You son of a... Consider what you're actually doing. And this is why, a lot of people say, you've got to have a session 0. You've got to have a sit down and chat about the backgrounds of your characters and who they are. I agree that you need to have a brief discussion about what's going to be happening and what the rules are and how you should be playing. And we discussed this in our very early videos on this channel.
This is a social interaction, right? Be mindful of what you're doing with the other players, because if you have this elaborate backstory, or like Gareth says, you're the prince of the land, and you're getting all this attention, be mindful of that, and don't make that consume the game. Don't try to ruin the game. This is a collaborative effort. You always want to collaborate with your fellow players and your game master. So don't try to take over the game. A great example of what I'm talking about is when I was playing online. I was playing with some other players, and of course, and we had a very sorrowful end, to the game. And my character was going to do something to it was kind of lighthearted and was kind of bring the spirits up of the party a little bit. And then we had an amazing moment in the game where one of the bard character, played by Vanessa of the Crafting Muse, she sang a dirge, like a sorrowful song for our friend that had left. Because the experience was so traumatic from what the adventure, our friend just kind of left and went off. And it was a very kind of, it was a downer moment, and we were all, emotionally invested in this, and we were, it was hard for the group. And she did this kind of sorrowful, she actually sung a sorrowful song. And it was the perfect ending to that session. And I had plans to do some kind of lighthearted thing, right? When this happened, I thought, I'll end it on an upper note and have a little lighthearted thing happen. But when she did that song, that was the perfect end to it. And it would have been rude of me to just do this little lighthearted thing at the end and ruin that moment. That was a fantastic moment. So keep in mind, when you're playing with other players, don't step on their moments. And when Gareth talks about turn order, that's very important, because I found when you kind of go around in turn order, not just in combat, but in social interactions, those people who are, are maybe not as social and as loud spoken, or someone who has this 50-page backstory and wants to interject in everything, or is the prince, that gives those other players the chance to shine. So always be mindful of giving those players that time. Even if you don't do the turn order, give everyone their time to shine. And as players, what I say is, when you see those players giving those shining moments, don't ruin them and interrupt them just because you got to get your moment in. Let them have that moment.
You'll also find with new players, they will struggle with doing this. One way to easily spot a new player in a game or new role players, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this? They're going to ask a lot of these kinds of questions. The thing is, you should always be saying yes. Absolutely, you should always be saying yes. But you should be also guiding them. So guide them with, with character interactions, with social interactions. Have NPCs that are there to help them along in the story more so than you would with veteran players, rather than just as the GM out of game saying, okay, you can do this, 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 and this. Speak to them as an NPC in the world so that they kind of understand, okay, I can actually do these things in the world as the character, and that's going to help me decide what I'm going to be doing. So, build their player agency. Now, if you ask a brand new player to go out and write a 5-page story about who their character is, they're going to be extremely rigid because they believe that there's a reason they've got to do this thing, and everything they do must be based upon what this is, and it limits the ability for them to start to use agency in the game. And that's why it can be quite detrimental. For new players, I often say you should give them, if it's their very first game, you should give them a character sheet that has a kind of style of character they might like to play. They've seen a few movies, like, I'd like to be someone who kicks ass and chews bubblegum and takes names. So you give them a fighter, let them name the character, and let them figure out who this person is. Think about, just in a brief sentence, who is this guy? In one sentence, who is this guy? Or girl, as the case may be. Is she's a kick-ass and take names kind of gal. Who is she, who is this? Why does she do this? And just a brief 1 or 2 sentences, and that's it. Then, in the game, prod them for information, because then they have to then start thinking about it. And then when their next turn comes around, they've had the 3 or 4 turns that it takes to get to where they are. They've had these 3 or 4 turns to think, it'd be really cool if, she thinks of herself as this crime fighter. She's kicking ass and taking names because she's a crime fighter. She doesn't like the Thieves Guild for some reason. And then she's and then the next, as her social thing comes around, she steps up to the guy and says, I don't like the cut of your jib, Mr. Thief person. I'm going to kick ass and take names. You're giving them an opportunity to think about their character because you're using the strict turn order, and you're giving them an opportunity to learn how to use their player agency.
One last thing I'd like to add, it's kind of what we talked about the, just a few sentences of your character background. So when we played, some of us played with Gareth as the game master and a 7DS system. And my character was just this farmer, right? He was just a simple farmer, but my background was that I was birthed by this famous adventuress named Glorious Maximus. Okay, and she basically stopped at this farm long enough to have me, birth me out, and then went back to, within a few days went back to adventuring and was out slaying monsters and stuff. So I'm like this poor schmuck who is trying to, I have this famous mother, I'm trying to live up to it. And it was just fun to bring that up in the game, we were constantly bringing it up in the game. Glorious Maximus, what would she do? Or I'm trying to, live up to my mother, or this kind of thing. And, that was just a fun element, and it was just from those few sentences.
And also the sort of the grounding glue that hold that party together is you were all drinking buddies in the tavern. That's all it was. We're just a bunch of drinking buddies. So you had a goat herder, a farmer, and a grave digger, and they were just drinking buddies in the local tavern. And then, literally chaos begins to go on. But what's most interesting was when Hankerin from Runehammer and Jeremy from Blackmagic Craft, their characters started to feed off your character backstory, the things you were saying. You know, your character started to become the mommy's boy. Even though his mother had left him at birth, he was like so consumed by this, his mother being this famous adventurer. It was like his whole existence was built around this thing. The other characters were like, oh God, not this story again, because they'd obviously heard it so many times in the tavern, right? So this wasn't written down. This wasn't something that they sat around and spoke about and said, oh, we should have these things. You know, this is spur of the moment stuff that was happening. And that's why that game is so memorable and worked so well, is because everyone was feeding off everyone else, adding little bits here and adding little bits here, you know. And Hankerin's like character, he wants to save the universe. He's a goat herder. I mean, he sees himself as the Superman dwarf, you know. And it's like at one point he's trying to like chest this portcullis, and he's trying to open this portcullis. He's just not strong enough. He's not capable of doing it. But it's like his character's will. He just wants to do it. And of course, everyone else has to kind of like help him. Okay, all right, yeah, we got the portcullis going up. It's all good, mate. Yeah. These sort of character moments, you know, there's whole like stretches of time that are just about the characters like going on about silly things, and you know, they see a buzzard at one point, and Hankerin's character's like, you know, the buzzards killed my parents, and it's like this whole sort of moment now he's fixated on killing this buzzard, you know. Stuff that wasn't in the backstory. There wasn't like, he just made that up on the fly, you know. And now he has this thing against buzzards. He just like, I hate buzzards. Of course, there are now going to be more buzzards in this game. And that's really what we're getting to. If you have too much character information, it's bad, because you can't really build on it as well as you can from like playing fast and loose.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah, that was just fun, like playing off of each other and just building up that fun, you know, the fun background. And then we had Jeremy's character, who was this grave digger, and he's always using the shovel. And it was just, the joke became, you know, what is he going to do with the shovel next? You know, he's rowing the boat with it, and you know, he's using it as a pry bar. And, you know, it was just fun, you know. It just came from being a grave digger, and he just had this unique weapon, which was this shovel he used to dig graves. I mean, it was just like, you know, he didn't write all this out. You know, this is his favorite shovel, and he does this, and you know, he didn't write all this out. This was just, you know, all, you know, ad-libbed in the game. And so yeah, keep yourself open to that, and I think you'll really enjoy the games and just have a blast at it, really.
And that shovel almost became a magical weapon, as we talked about in the previous video, you know. And it will take on that kind of significance as it goes, because his character is so attached to the shovel. He doesn't want to lose the shovel. And at one point in the game, he thought he had actually lost the shovel, and he as a player had a visceral reaction to that. He was like, I've lost my shovel? It's like, how dare you take that away from my character? You know, and this is the thing we're going to harp on and harp on and harp on about these things. And, you know, hopefully, you know, after enough browbeating, you might realize our mantras, you know, our philosophy is something that can help you. And, you know, this is what's built into our modules. So think about how our videos are helping you, and support our channel by purchasing our modules from our website, questgivers.com, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you again soon.